Susan teaches a Year 4 class 3 days a week, and another teacher, Mark, teaches the class the other days. In the third week of Term 1, Susan and Mark's peaceful Year 4 class was turned upside down by the arrival of a new student. Jason, a 10-year-old boy born in South Africa, came to Australia when he was 6 years old, and shortly after arriving his parents broke up and he never saw his father again. Reports from Jason's last school revealed significant behavioural problems as well as low literacy and numeracy levels. During a meeting between Mark and Susan just before Jason arrived in their class, Mark told Susan that over the years he had taught lots of problem kids like this one, and that all these students needed to know was who was boss and that disrespectful behaviour would not be tolerated. Susan decided to follow her colleague's advice, and that was the approach they took with Jason from day one. After a disastrous 2 weeks where Jason flatly refused to do any work and disrupted virtually every lesson, Mark complained of the principal and said that Jason did not belong in a normal school with normal students and that he should instead be placed in a behaviour unit for problem kids. Troubled by the situation, Susan decided to seek the advice from her friend Kylie. The first thing Kylie asked Susan was, "What's in this young boy's virtual school bag?" Susan thought back to her days at uni and clearly remembered this term and what it meant. Susan paused and said, "Well, I think he's from somewhere in Africa and he lives with his mother." Kylie said, "Is that it? Is that all you know?" Kylie then reminded Susan of the uni lectures exploring virtual school bags, deficit discourses and turnaround pedagogies. Susan said, "Well, when I first started at this school after uni, Mark and the other teachers told me that those things were ridiculous ideas dreamed up by academics who had never been in a real classroom, so I just followed their lead." Kylie said, "I don't care what the other teachers say to you at your school. I've been using these strategies and they help me better understand my students, inform my pedagogy and help with lesson planning. Also, in my experience, terms like at-risk students are all too often simply deficit discourses repackaged. Instead of teachers or schools considering the possibility that it's their curriculum or pedagogy that's the problem, it's much easier for those in power to allocate blame to the student or their families for any apparent learning problems or behaviours." Kylie said, "Turnaround pedagogies help me to see all my students as children with potential, and when they struggle it's often because I have failed to learn enough about them to help unlock their potential." Susan was inspired. When the students entered the classroom Monday morning, on the whiteboard was a picture of a bag with words and pictures inside it. Susan began to explain to the student that the pictures and the words represented things that she liked and disliked, things that she did with her family on weekends, things about her Jewish heritage, and hobbies she did outside school. Susan then said to the students, "This is my virtual school bag. Even though you can't see it, I carry it everywhere I go, and it affects everything that I do, even as your teacher." She then gave each student a piece of A3 paper with a large bag printed on it and asked them to draw pictures or write words inside the bag about things that were important to them. After 30 minutes, all of the students had finished their work and she asked if anyone would like to share. To her amazement, everyone, even Jason's hand shot up. From the information Susan gained about Jason, she was able to modify some of her lessons to include stories about South Africa, including pictures of their animals and information about their customs. During discussion, she would ask Jason for input, saying to the class that on this topic Jason and his mother were her teachers. Susan began to see a complete change in Jason's attitude in class, but sadly the opposite was happening with Mark. Mark refused to modify his lessons and include anything about African themes or modify his pedagogy. By the end of Term 2, Mark's ongoing conflict with Jason was taking its toll until one day Jason exploded in class and threw a chair at Mark. As a result, Jason was suspended and Susan never saw him again. She later found out that the principal had refused to have Jason back and recommended he go to a behavioural unit for, in his words, problem students like him. Over the years, Susan often wondered what happened to Jason and wondered how his life at her school might have turned out different if Mark and the other teachers had taken the time to learn more about him, reflect on their pedagogy and better ways to connect with him, instead of focusing on the negatives and labelling him as the problem.
Created using Powtoon.